It had been 6 months since Yor and Geneva's wedding, yet Kofo still couldn't get Leah out of his head. It was ridiculous, he told himself. He'd dated beautiful women before, plenty of them, and never once had he found himself inventing reasons and flimsy excuses to be around a woman like Leah Harris. But here he was again, on the 19th floor. Last week, he'd told the guard he was checking to see if they had internet access because his computer was moving slow. The guard didn't even pretend to believe him, just giving Kofo a look that said, "Sure man," before returning to his screen. Kofo didn't care, he couldn't help it. Leah was different. She was 5 feet 3 inches, with a warm toffee complexion that glowed like the last light of sunset, slender, yet with curves that made his thoughts scatter. Her braids were always swept into a neat bun, sometimes high, sometimes low, sometimes slightly off-center, but always elegant. Her makeup was soft, simple, highlighting her natural beauty instead of hiding it. He'd compared her to every woman he'd ever dated, and none of them came close. He'd been caught staring more than once, staring so hard his vision blurred. The last time, Yor had walked up beside him and murmured, "It's a thin line between admiration and leering, little brother." Kofo had nearly jumped out of his skin. He wasn't used to being teased. He'd hurried away, Yor's laughter echoing behind him. What was wrong with him? Why couldn't he just walk up to her like he had with countless women before? Why did he find himself taking extra time to get ready in the morning, straightening his collar twice, adjusting his watch, making sure his cologne was perfect, especially on days he knew he'd see her? And speaking of cologne, months ago she'd complimented it. Just a simple, "You smell nice today." He'd blushed. Then he'd gone out and bought the matching body wash, spray and deodorant like a teenager trying to impress his crush. He wanted to ask her out. Badly. But Leah wasn't the type to give second chances. If he was going to do this, he needed to do it right. That meant cutting ties with women who still lingered like old habits. He wasn't proud of that. But for her, he'd change. Meanwhile, on the 19th floor. "So what was his reason for coming down here today?" Geneva asked, barely containing her grin as she leaned against Leah's desk. Leah sighed. "He wanted to know when the delivery people were arriving." Geneva burst out laughing. "The delivery people? Isn't Mrs. Patterson coordinating that project?" "Yes, and I told him that. Twice." "When are you two gonna stop this game y'all are playing?" Geneva teased. Leah shrugged, trying for nonchalance. "I don't know what game you're talking about." Geneva raised an eyebrow. "So you're playing dumb now?" "Leah, I saw you two at my wedding. You were practically glued together. If I didn't know better, I'd think it was your wedding." Leah tried to glare, but it came out more like a shy smile. "Mrs. Antwi, I truly don't know what you are talking about, nor what he's thinking. I catch him staring at me all the time. And yes, it's obvious his trips down here are a cover to see, I think, me. But I don't know." She paused, chewing her lip. "And let's be real. Kofo is a playboy. Fully vetted. I remember the women he brought to events, each one more bougie and mannequin-like than the last. I'm a simple chick from Mississippi. I refer to myself as a chick, nothing sophisticated, not a baby girl or princess or queen. I'm not his type. And he's not mine." But even as she said it, her voice wavered, because she remembered the first day she saw him, back when Fusion was still operating out of Yor and Geneva's home. She'd opened the door, and there he was, tall, 6 feet of tailored perfection, deep chocolate skin, a grin that made his eyes sparkle. She'd thought he was handsome. No, fine. Dangerously fine. And dangerous in general. Smart, charming, confident. The kind of man who could ruin a woman's peace of mind without even trying. Geneva gave her a knowing smile. "Just like you catch him staring at you, I catch you staring at him. So keep telling yourself whatever you need to." Leah tried to look irritated, but her eyes betrayed her. She turned back to her computer, signaling the conversation was over. Geneva laughed and walked back to her office. Kofo sat alone in the dim light of his penthouse, the silence heavy around him. The memories haunted him, sharp and unforgiving. He remembered the day he asked Blessings to come to the States, the hesitation. She was afraid of flying alone, and she'd told him she wanted to wait until he returned to Ghana in a few months to make the trip back to the States with him. He'd pressed her, eager to start their new life together, insistent that they couldn't wait forever. He remembered her voice trembling as she said she'd come. He'd promised her everything would be fine. He'd convinced himself as much. And then, everything changed. It was a clear, cold day when the news came. A plane crash. An accident. No survivors. He remembered the shock, the numbness, the screaming silence that followed. The world had shattered around him. He blamed himself, every bit of it. He had pushed her to come sooner, to leave her comfort behind, even when she was scared. His insistence had made her feel pressured, and he'd convinced himself that it was his fault she hadn't waited. That if he had only been more patient, less selfish, she'd still be alive. That blame had festered in him, twisting his joy into guilt. The ache of loss had turned him into someone who sought distraction, something to dull the hollow ache inside. He buried himself in work, in charm, in fleeting encounters, trying to forget the emptiness that haunted him. He became a playboy not because he was inherently reckless, but because he was afraid of loving again, afraid of losing again, afraid of facing the pain that never truly left. Every woman he'd dated after was a distraction, a fleeting moment of warmth that never reached his soul. Until Leah. She was different, grounded, strong, real. And for the first time in years, Kofo felt the stirrings of something genuine. But beneath his charm and mischievous grin lurked the shadows of guilt, an unspoken weight that he carried every day. Because part of him still believed that loving her meant risking everything again, and that fear kept him from truly opening his heart. He buried that pain deep, wearing his playboy reputation like armor, convinced that the only way to protect himself from heartbreak was to keep love at arm's length. But with Leah, he wondered, could he finally face what he'd been running from all along? Kofo stood in the elevator, hands in his pockets, heart pounding harder than he liked to admit. He was done pretending, done making excuses, done letting fear stop him. Besides, he'd approached many beautiful women before without hesitation. Leah shouldn't be any different. But she was, and Kofo knew it. Today he wasn't going to the 19th floor for a fake reason. Today, he was going for her. Leah, sitting at her desk, felt a flutter in her stomach she couldn't explain. Or maybe she could. Maybe she just didn't want to. Kofo paused at her office door, cleared his throat. Leah looked up, and her breath caught. It should be against the law for a man to be that fine. Tall, tailored, calm, like he had all the time in the world, even though something in his eyes said he didn't. Yes? She asked, aiming for matter of fact. It failed. Her voice came out soft, low, almost a whisper. Kofo adjusted his stance, cleared his throat again, buying himself a second to find his nerve. "How are you?" he asked. My God, why is this so hard, he thought. She's just a woman, a little one at that. But here he was, feeling 13 again, like he was gearing up for his first kiss. "I'm doing fine, Kofo. What about you?" Leah answered, a little too enthusiastically. "Yeah, I'm doing great," he said, and added a smile. Leah's heart did a full somersault. She smiled back before she could stop herself, and Kofo felt his breath catch, like he'd walked into a room with no air. He rushed the words out before he could talk himself down. "So I have tickets to see Jill Lawrence next week. I wanted to know if you'd like to go. I know you said she's one of your favorite artists. We can get dinner beforehand too." A brief furrow crossed Leah's brow. Oh God, she's going to say no, he thought. Then her expression softened into a smile. "Yes," she said, "that would be great." Relief hit him so hard it almost made his knees weak. "Great," he said then, bold now, before he could lose it, added, "It's a date." The words hung in the air like a promise. "Yep," Leah replied, trying to sound casual and failing. "A date it is." She cleared her throat. "We can talk logistics later this week." Kofo gave a quick nod, like if he stayed one more second, he'd do something reckless, like smile too hard. Then he turned and walked away, the corners of his mouth lifting the moment he reached the hallway. After he left, Leah stared at her screen without seeing a single word. When had she told him Jill Lawrence was one of her favorite artists? She replayed every conversation she could remember. Meetings, hallway exchanges, the wedding, but nothing landed. Finally, she shook her head and returned to her work, half waiting for Geneva to step out, so she could tell her everything. Geneva didn't make her wait long. She appeared at the corner of Leah's desk like she'd been summoned by gossip alone, trying and failing to hide the sheer joy on her face. "Don't look at me like that," Leah said, but her smile gave her away. She replayed the quick conversation. Kofo at the door, the way his voice dipped, the Jill Lawrence tickets, dinner, the words, "It's a date," still ringing in her ears. Then she frowned, more confused than she wanted to admit. But when did I ever tell him Jill Lawrence was one of my favorite artists? I can't remember saying that. Not once. Geneva waved a hand as if Leah was worrying a thread that didn't need pulling. Don't rack your brain. One thing about the Antwi men. They notice everything and forget nothing. Her grin softened into something warmer. They're intentional, especially with people they care about. Geneva leaned closer, dropping her voice as if handing over a secret. You could have said it as an afterthought, just a little comment while you were working, and Kofo would have caught it. Remember it. Held onto it until he needed it. Over the last year, Geneva had grown fond of Leah, protective even. Leah was sharp and capable, yes, but Geneva had also seen parts of her no one at Fusion noticed. More than once, Geneva had overheard hushed, intense phone calls. Leah's voice low and controlled, then strained. And afterward, Leah's composure would be shaken in small ways. A tight jaw, fingers pressing too hard on the keyboard, eyes distant as if somewhere else entirely. One afternoon, after a call that ended with Leah staring at the wall, Leah finally confided in Geneva. Her mother's bitterness from failed marriages, unfulfilled dreams, and disappointments had spilled into her words and tone. Leah, the oldest, caught the brunt, whether in cutting words or rough hands. That's why Spellman was a godsend. A 450-mile barrier between Macomb, Mississippi and Atlanta. The worst of the physical dysfunction was in the past, limited now to verbal wounds that still stung. Eventually her brothers followed her to Atlanta, finding space to breathe and thrive once they were out from under their mother's constant insults. Geneva straightened, eyes shining, not with pity, but certainty. You've been strong for a long time, Leah, so if a good man is trying to be thoughtful, let him. Let someone show up for you for once. Kofo caught himself smiling as he headed back toward his office. He tried to press his face into something neutral, something executive. It didn't work. Happiness refused to be tucked away. Yor saw him in the hall, took one look, and immediately changed direction, like a man who could smell a story. What's up, little brother? Yor asked as Kofo stepped into the conference room. Nothing. Why you ask, brother? Yor's mouth twitched. Because you were almost skipping down the hall, and I've known you for over 30 years. I can't remember the last time you looked this happy. Excited, or are you drunk? Kofo finally faced him, attempting dignity, and failing. Leah and I going out next week, he said. Dinner and the Jill Lawrence concert. Yor's eyes widened with delight, pure brotherly mischief. Oh, I see, he said, dragging the words out as if savoring them. Then he laughed, loud enough to bounce off the glass walls. So no more random trips to the 19th floor pretending to check on the internet, huh? Geneva told me. Pathetic, little brother. I thought your game was better than that. Internet? Yar walked out still laughing, shaking his head. Kofo stood there for a moment, heat in his face, pride bruised, and still smiling. Because for the first time in months, the pull he'd been fighting had a direction. Now he just had to make sure he didn't ruin it. Leah Harris did not give out second chances. If he was going to ask for her trust, her time, her heart, he had to make the first date count. That meant returning to his office and doing the one thing he'd been putting off, severing the ties he should have cut the moment he realized Leah wasn't a game. Kofo planned everything with the attention to detail of a man who understood the assignment. Make this experience unforgettable. While getting dressed, he replayed every detail with the precision of a Swiss watch. Double-checked, then triple-checked, his reflection. A tailored black blazer and pants, sharp. A crisp, pale pink button-down, perfectly pressed. Italian shoes polished to a gleam. Accessories. His Vacheron caliber 1731 on his wrist. A gold herringbone necklace at his collarbone. Dinner. A private dining room at Marcel. Music set to a mix of classic R&B, and enough country to make Leah laugh. Check. Car service booked. Stocked with Krug Grand Cuvée. Check. Center orchestra seats. Check. Backstage meet and greet. Check. His nerves. Definitely check. Kofo stepped out of his midtown penthouse into the night, each stride filled with anticipation and excitement he usually kept behind professionalism. By the time the car pulled up to Leah's building, he'd reminded himself 3 times to breathe. Leah opened her closet, then closed it, then opened again, hoping the right choice might appear if she looked hard enough. In the end, she settled on simple, because simple was her language. A sapphire blue dress that hugged her in all the right places. Sapphire heels, 3 inches. A gold necklace with a single diamond. Diamond studs. A tennis bracelet. Her hair swept into a sophisticated bun. Jasmine lingered at her neck, soft but undeniable. Her makeup was a touch more dramatic, yet still elegant. Still her. Outside her door, Kofo stood with his hand half raised to knock, pulse acting like it had a mind of its own. This has to go well, he thought. The thought irritated him. He didn't like the way one woman could rearrange him, make him careful. Then the door opened. Kofo's nervous system rewired on the spot. He hadn't thought it was possible for Leah to be more beautiful than she already was. Yet there she stood, looking like a goddess in sapphire. Leah studied him, trying to catch whatever expression flickered across his face. But it moved too fast. The one thing she did notice was the obvious. He looked like a chiseled god standing in her doorway. Again, she thought it should be illegal for a man to be that fine. She tried to steady her nerves, praying he couldn't hear her heart pounding. "Hello," she whispered, soft and trembling. "You look nice." Kofo cleared his throat, and, without thinking, said the truth. "You look beautiful." Leah blushed. Kofo noticed. And for a moment, their connection felt charged with something neither of them dared name. The car ride impressed Leah before they even left the garage. Waiting in the chilled bucket was her favorite sparkling wine. She stared at it, then at Kofo. How does he know these things, she wondered, but didn't ask. Yet. Marcel was everything. Dim light, quiet elegance, the kind of place Leah had only ever heard people talk about. Kofo led her to a private dining room, where a personal attendant seemed to anticipate their needs, before Leah even realized she had them. Music played low in the background. Classic R&B braided with a little country like a private joke. Leah ordered the snapper with grilled vegetables and quinoa, and more sparkling wine. Kofo had filet mignon with truffle mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus, and a glass of red wine that seemed to belong in a movie. At first their conversation was slow and measured, like both of them were testing the ground. Then at some point, neither of them could later say exactly when, it turned effortless. They talked about the past, about how they'd both had to grow up early in different ways. They talked about the future, and the surprise of it was how easily they stayed there, together in the same imagined picture. Kids. How many? They both said 3, then laughed at how quickly the agreement came. Faith. Christian. Politics. Independent. It hit Kofo in the middle of Leah's sentence that these were conversations he'd always avoided with other women. Not because he didn't have opinions, but because he never cared enough to build a life around them. The concert was spellbinding, at least to Leah. If Kofo told his version, it'd be mostly lies. He couldn't take his eyes off her long enough to memorize the set list. She looked like she belonged in the front row of a life she'd only recently begun dreaming about. When it ended, Kofo didn't rush them out. Leah didn't question it. She just enjoyed the moment, wishing it wouldn't end. Then a staff member approached. "Mr. Antwi, Mrs. Lawrence is ready." "Wait. What?" Leah froze, eyes wide with shock. Kofo took her hand, calm as if he was guiding her to meet an old friend. His palm sent shockwaves through her. It was just her, Kofo, and Jill. Jill greeted Kofo first, speaking like old friends. Leah stood starstruck, trying to remember how to speak. When Jill turned to her, her smile widened. "You must be special," she said, giving Kofo a look. "Because Coffee here has never introduced me to any of his friends." She air-quoted, friends, and Leah caught how Kofo suddenly looked exposed. Jill seemed genuinely pleased, humbled, when Leah finally found her voice. "Your song Golden," she swallowed, blinking fast. "It's been the soundtrack to my life." The meeting ended with Jill and Kofo promising to keep in touch. Jill gave Kofo a warning wrapped in love. "She's a keeper. You better do right by her." Then she softened her voice to Leah. "And he's a good man, take care of him." Just like that, Leah experienced the most amazing moment of her life. The ride home was a haze. She recounted every detail to Kofo, as if he hadn't been there. "I wish this would never end," she said finally, nostalgia in her voice, as she rested her head on Kofo's shoulder. The simple weight of her there almost made his body shudder. Knowing that his actions were responsible for her happiness, knowing he'd made her feel seen, lit something in him he'd never wanted to admit he craved. He didn't just want to make her smile again. He wanted to replicate this feeling again and again and again. They arrived, Kofo opening her door and helping her out like it was the only ending possible. Without thinking, she slid her hand into his arm. He pulled her closer as they entered the elevator, their quiet turning into something loud. At her door, Leah looked up, eyes shining. I will never forget this night, she whispered, trembling. Then she rose onto her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and timid at first, like she was asking permission. Kofo wrapped an arm around her, and the kiss deepened. For a moment they clung to each other, refusing to let go of the last piece of the night. Kofo felt himself slipping, control unraveling in a way that scared him. A low sound left his throat before he could stop it, and he pulled back, forcing distance between them. The heat left Leah so suddenly she let out a small whimper, and Kofo felt a flash of pain at it, as if he'd caused an injury instead of setting a boundary. Abafra, Kofo started in Akantwi, voice deep. If I stay I won't be able to keep my control, I have to go. Leah looked at him, eyes still dark with passion, and nodded, because her words failed her. She turned and slipped inside, back pressing against the door for support more than anything else, and prayed that if this was a dream she wouldn't wake up. Kofo stood outside for a moment, staring at the door like it might pull him back in. He tried to will his legs to move, tried to force his heart to slow down. After a few seconds of fighting for control, he finally turned and walked back to the car. Sleep evaded them both that night. The next morning, Leah was still on a high from the events of the night before. She replayed every detail over and over again. She paid special attention to the kiss, that kiss. Just thinking about it, thinking about that fine man, caused Leah's body to betray her. A knock at her door. She looked at her security camera. Someone holding a large orchid bouquet. Blue orchids. She quickly signed for it. And a small jewelry box. She stared at them for a moment, then took a deep inhale of the flowers, and got lost in the sweet fragrance of the massive bouquet. After several seconds, she remembered the small chocolate-colored jewelry box. She set the flowers on the table, and turned her attention to the box in her hand. She opened it slowly. Chocolate diamond stud earrings. What? Oh my God, what? Leah felt her head getting light, and realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out in a rush, followed by a scream that probably had her neighbors' fingers poised over their phones to report a crime. Oh my God, she said aloud again as she read the card. The card read, "The pure simplicity of you is truly beautiful to me." It was a play on what she'd said about orchids. She'd told him at the wedding that their simplicity made them beautiful, that it was the purest and rarest form of beauty. He remembered that, and he remembered her love of chocolate diamonds. This man was too good to be true. Leah told herself to proceed with caution. Kofo was up early, reliving the night. Leah in that dress, her laugh, the concert, Jill Lawrence, the kiss. He'd picked out the earrings last month, when it became apparent that Leah wasn't a passing distraction. And he'd chosen the flowers after studying orchids, the way Leah had pointed out their simple, pure beauty, the same way he saw her. They'd been delivered, and he hoped she liked them. His phone rang. It was Leah. His breath caught. Hello. I love them. I love everything, she said, voice full of emotion. You didn't have to. Everything is beautiful. You're beautiful, he replied. Silence. She gathered herself and said, Honestly, Kofo, I love them. This is one more thing I'll never forget. I've never gotten flowers before. You're making it hard for a girl to keep a level head. Thank you, Kofo. They talked for an hour, ending with plans to meet for dinner. The night ended with them agreeing to explore this thing that they were feeling, as a couple. Monday morning, Leah was literally walking on clouds. The weekend spent with Kofo was fresh on her mind, and she could not wait to tell Geneva everything. Retelling the events had not gotten old. She had the same glow and excitement now as she did when she replayed the chain of events earlier. She recounted how she had prayed for a man like Kofo, and how she was this close, pinching her thumb and index finger together for effect, to accepting that her ideal man was just a fantasy, only for Kofo to come into her life. She admitted that she still struggled with the disappointments of her past, trying to overshadow the happiness she had found with Kofo. What you think about that market? Kofo heard Yao asking. What? Crap. He has done it again, losing himself in the mere thought of Leah. Kofo demanded himself. Get your head in the game. Brother, Yor said with a grin. I thought you'd be some good to me in the company after you got the girl, but I see your focus is worse. Kofo shot Yao a look, embarrassed and amused. This was new territory, loving someone with a future in mind, and it both scared and excited him. The realization that Leah was Kofo's future made him sever ties with the few women he had casual, on-again, off-again relationships with. The conversations were not hard because he knew what he hoped he would be getting in return. Leah. But Cherie did not take it well. She vowed he would regret stringing her along, then called him an unflattering name and hung up the phone. Kofo remembered telling her that he had met someone he wanted to explore a real relationship with. Looking back, he could see how those words would set Sherry off. She immediately said, "It's the little homely-looking girl working in your sister-in-law's company." Kofo was taken aback. How did she figure that out? She answered his thoughts a few seconds later. "I saw how you looked at her. How you made it your business to help her with her chair, asking if she needed anything. I am not stupid," she spat. Following the, "You will regret it," threat, and then silence, she was gone. Kofo chalked it up to the rantings of a jilted lover, but made a mental note to keep an eye on Cherie, just in case he was wrong. He would grow to appreciate this decision later. Leah had invited Kofo over for dinner the following Saturday. She had spent the past 7 weeks learning to make one of his favorite meals, fish tomato stew and rice. She was nervous, a fact Kofo noticed immediately. Her house smelled of home. He recognized the fragrant deliciousness of the spices used to make fish tomato soup. Kofo's heart warmed when his mother told him that Leah had asked her for the recipe. Geneva revealed that Leah had forced her and Yor to taste more than 15 attempts, until she had perfected the dish and deemed it good enough for Kofo. Right then and there, Kofo decided, without tasting it, that it would be the best fish tomato stew ever, regardless of its actual taste. A genuine, involuntary hum came from Kofo when he tasted the stew and rice Leah had prepared. He ate the rest of his meal in silence, savoring every spoonful until he heard his spoon scraping the empty bowl. Leah laughed and gave him some more. After he had stuffed himself with 3 helpings of the stew, Kofo settled on the sofa with Leah to watch a movie. 1 hour later, Kofo woke up to Leah informing him that it was late, and inviting him to stay over if he liked. The words hung in the air, taking the necessary time needed for Kofo to process what was really being offered. Not wanting to confuse what he was hoping for with reality, Kofo stood and kissed her on the forehead, in preparation for his departure. "Abufra, I would love to stay," he said, "but a man can only maintain restraint for so long." "Who said you have to practice restraint?" she whispered. He inhaled a deep breath and adjusted her so he could look at her, study her. "You sure this is what you want?" His eyes went dark with emotion. She simply nodded, not confident her voice would not abandon her. He kissed her long and possessively, and when they briefly paused, she took his hand, shaking, and led him to her bedroom. Finally, Kofo thought, after 6 months of waiting, playing with fire, teetering on the edge of promised passion, she was finally releasing the brakes she had placed on them. That night, they gave themselves to each other completely, moving with a sweet urgency that left them blissfully exhausted, drifting off into a deep sleep, still entwined in each other's embrace. The next morning, Leah awoke to the sound of her smoke alarm and the smell of burning. "Wait, what was that?" she asked herself, leaping out of bed and bracing herself on the nightstand because her legs were still recovering from the night before. When she reached the kitchen, the scene was hilarious and a little frightening. Kofo was waving a dish towel at the smoke detector with one hand while trying to nurse a burnt finger on the other. Smoke rose from the stove and oven simultaneously. Remnants of discarded food and containers were everywhere. And flour. Why was there so much flour? It covered every surface, including him. Leah sprinted into action. She opened the balcony doors, returned to the kitchen, and removed the pans from the stove and oven, placing them in the sink. She turned on the exhaust, asking Kofo what was going on in his head that made him think he could cook. He looked at her intently and said, "After last night." But his declaration was interrupted by the smoke alarm blaring again. Leah grabbed a towel and fanned toward the alarm. When the chaos leveled out, Leah couldn't contain it any longer. She doubled over with laughter, tears streaming down her face, fighting to catch her breath. Leah stood there, hands on her hips, her silk robe dusted with flour, and her eyes narrowing at the man who looked more like a powdered donut than a COO. "After last night you thought you'd burn my building down as an encore." Kofo let out a sheepish laugh, wiping a streak of white flour across his forehead, only to make it worse. "After last night I thought you deserved to wake up to a feast. I wanted to show you that I could take care of you too." Clearly, he gestured to the blackened remains of what might have been pancakes and the blizzard of flour on the floor. "My ambition outpaced my ability." Leah's faux irritation melted into a soft, genuine laugh that bubbled up from her chest. She walked over to him, stepping over a discarded eggshell, and took his unburnt hand in hers. "Kofo, you bought me chocolate diamonds. You got me Jill Lawrence. You don't have to cook to prove you're intentional." "I know," he murmured, his voice dropping into that low, thundering register that made her knees feel like they were made of the very flour on the floor. He pulled her closer, ignoring the mess, his eyes searching hers. But I wanted to do something that wasn't just about money. I wanted to give you my time, even if I am terrible at it. Leah reached up, using her thumb to brush the flour off his cheekbone. Well, you gave me a story I'll never forget. That's worth more than a perfect breakfast. Leah looked back at the kitchen, and started laughing again. It's not that funny, Kofo said, trying to fake irritation. Yes it is, Leah managed between bursts. Then, without thinking, she said, Baby, I love you, I really do. The words hung in the air, as if they knew she needed time to process the gravity of what she had just said. Kofo heard and processed them instantly. He cupped her face in his hands and said, Abafra, I love you too. I have been in love with you since the wedding. True, I did not know what it was then, but I know now. I have known for a while it was love. And Leah, my Abafra, I love you more than anything. You are my air, my sight, my voice. He finished winded because the words were not planned. They materialized from truth and raw emotion. He held her face for a brief second and kissed her. She returned his passion like a woman who finally realized she had found her future, her security, her love. Kofo's mischievous grin returned, slow and heat-filled. He leaned down, his lips hovering just an inch from hers, the scent of jasmine and burnt toast mingling in the air. In that case, how about we forget the kitchen and go back to bed? We can order delivery later. Leah didn't need to think about it. She simply nodded, her voice finally returning as she whispered against his lips. Best idea you've had all morning. Unplanned, they found themselves back in Leah's bed, wrapped in the tenderness of what they had just confessed. We have to go. Leah was the first to break the spell of their oasis. We are meeting Yor in Geneva for brunch, and since our breakfast, she trailed off with a smile. Kofo groaned and rolled out of bed and put on his clothes. I hear you, he said. I'll go home and get ready. I'll be back to get you at 1. He informed her. You don't have to. Leah started, but Kofo cut her off. Be ready at 1, he said with a quick kiss, then strolled out, leaving Leah in a state of pure bliss. That man is too fine, she said to herself. Her phone rang. Mom, she said cheerfully, determined not to allow her mother to destroy her peace. Leah, her mother said, dripping with pinned-up anger she was saving to unload on her. I will be in Atlanta next week and I'll be staying with you. Just like that, no greeting, no asking, just like everything else, matter of fact, laced with toxic, misplaced rage. Okay mama, Leah heard herself say, suddenly exhausted. Good, I will see you Wednesday. My flight arrives at 3 p.m. Delta. You or one of your sorry brothers need to pick me up. With that, she was gone, and Leah was left with a feeling of dread. Kofo didn't remember the drive home, parking the car, or walking to his building. Even though he had just left her, he couldn't wait to see her again. He thought nothing could spoil his mood, and then he turned the corner and saw her standing at his door. Cherie. Correction. His mood changed. Kofo saw her at his door. Cherie. Her presence changed everything. Not anxious, not frantic. Waiting, watching. Her eyes assessed him. What are you doing here? Kofo asked, flat, unlocking the door. I came to talk and see how you're doing, Cherie replied, her eyes never stopping. He paused briefly. I'm fine, he said, just fine. No curiosity, no engagement, no opening. Well, I'm not doing fine, she said, voice cooler now. It's been 6 months since you found your real relationship, and not once did you check if I was okay. Kofo shifted, blocking access but not making it obvious. I want you to be okay, he said, but we are not together anymore. That's not my responsibility. I miss us, she said, a crack in her voice. I'm not giving up on us. Kofo's jaw flexed. Cherie saw it. Good. A reaction. She made her move. I know you're fascinated with your little Southern Simple Girl project. His energy shifted instantly. Sharp, cold, absolute. Don't you dare, he said. No need for volume. Cherie went still. She's not my project, Kofo said, stepping forward, forceful enough to make her step back. She's the woman I love. Cherie studied him. No infatuation, no ego, just conviction. And that, he continued, is my future. To marry her, have children with her, build a life with her. Her stomach dropped, but her mind sharpened. Future, roots, plans. She masked her shock, letting her lip tremble just enough. Kofo, why are you being so cruel? You're willing to throw everything away. But inside, she was recalibrating. Goodbye, Cherie, Kofo said, the door closing firmly. She lingered in the hallway, expression hurt but controlled. She was already planning her next move. Kofo arrived to pick Leah up at 1. He looked effortlessly polished, designer jeans, fitted black t-shirt, expensive loafers, and smelled incredible. Leah, true to herself, chose simple elegance, white jeans, a printed satin blouse exposing her back, 3-inch strappy sandals, and a subtle scent of jasmine. When she stepped closer, the scent hit him, vivid and intoxicating. His mind flashed back to their night together, forcing himself to steady. The drive to brunch was already lively. Geneva saw them first. "Oh my God," she said dramatically, nudging Yor. "Look at them." Yor leaned back, amused. "If it isn't the man who used to, check the internet, on the 19th floor. Kofo sighed. "Brother," Geneva laughed. Weeks of fake excuses just to pass Leah's desk. He pulled her chair, refusing to acknowledge her teasing. "Please sit." "Both of you." Kofo shook his head. "I hate you both." Geneva rested her chin on her hand, eyes sparkling. "You're just embarrassed, because you were down bad." "You bought an entire cologne set because she said you smelled nice once," Geneva added. Leah blinked, then slowly turned to Kofo. "You did that?" He looked straight ahead. "Yes." The sincerity was more impactful than the joke. Leah looked at him differently. Softer. Geneva saw it. "She's never seen Kofo like this," she said softly. "And I don't say that lightly." Ya added. Kofo exhaled, knowing what was coming. "Can we order food before this turns into testimony service?" Geneva laughed, pride in her expression. The mood was warm and easy, laughter lingering, glasses half full, until Geneva's expression changed. She was watching past Leah's shoulder. "Kofo," she said carefully. Leah turned slowly. "Cherie." Uninvited, confident, her presence commanding. Cherie stopped at the edge of the table. She let the silence stretch. Then her eyes landed on Kofo. "Hi," she said softly. Too soft. Too controlled. Kofo didn't stand or smile. "Cherie," Leah said, her voice calm. "And you are?" Cherie smiled. Wider now. "I'm Cherie. Kofo and I used to be close." "Used to." She paused. Kofo's voice was steady. "Cherie, yes, this is Leah, my present and my future." Cherie's face flickered with anger, then she recovered. "Just wanted to see for myself," she said lightly, "the woman who made the great Kofo Antwi change his entire life." Geneva's brows lifted, Yor leaned back, arms crossed. Leah didn't react, didn't flinch. She simply reached for her glass, sipped and met Cherie's gaze. "What exactly were you expecting to see?" she asked, steady. Cherie's smile widened, but her expression was measured. "Leave," Kofo said, voice final. "No one here wants you," he added. Cherie's eyes lingered on their hands. Still close, still connected. "Good," she said quietly. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Silence. Not heavy, just silence. Yor whistled softly. "Well, that was unexpected." Kofo exhaled slowly, then turned to Leah. "I'm sorry." "Is she going to be a problem?" Leah asked quietly. Kofo's answer was immediate. "No." Leah studied him, then nodded. "Okay." She took another sip of her glass, deciding. He kissed her cheek, she leaned into it. They resumed their brunch, sharing light jokes and promises to meet next week. Cherie didn't slow until she reached the front. She paused, composed, then walked on, her mind racing. Leah, undeniable, quiet, confidence, commanding presence. Cherie's jaw tightened. That's what he chose? Not flashy, not performative, authentic. That made her dangerous. But Leah's calm, unfazed, unshaken, was even more threatening. Cherie exhaled, replaying the moment. Leah's question. What exactly were you expecting to see? Not defensive. Not emotional. Measured. It wasn't someone easily rattled. Her attention shifted. Kofo. His tone was now cold, decisive. "Leave." No hesitation. Cherie's stomach dropped. He was gone. Emotionally, if not physically. And when she looked at Leah, the certainty, the love, they both radiated. She knew this wasn't a fleeting infatuation. It was real love. Cherie's lips pressed into a thin line. This changed everything. It wasn't about nostalgia or seduction anymore. It was about something smarter. She straightened. "This isn't over," she murmured, and walked away, already planning her next move. The weight of the evening lingered long after the moment had passed, settling into Leah's chest in a way she could not quite shake. By the time she arrived at the office the next morning, she pushed it all down the way she always did, burying it beneath deadlines, strategy, and the illusion of control. But unease has a way of resurfacing, and this time it followed her into the room. Leah and Geneva sat in Leah's office, replaying the events of their last marketing campaign pitch. Geneva was slow and deliberate as she reviewed the presentation, carefully searching for gaps. But when she spoke, her corrections came rapidly and with absolute certainty. Leah made the corrections on her laptop, Geneva on the hard copy of the document itself. Once satisfied with the finished product, she placed the presentation neatly on the desk and turned her full attention back to Leah. "So we haven't had a chance to talk since your mother arrived. How is it going?" Geneva asked. Leah took a deep breath. Removing her glasses, she pressed the bridge of her nose between her index finger and thumb. In that moment, she looked like a woman who hadn't slept in weeks. "It's only been 24 hours, Leah said with an exhausted sigh, "and she's already told each of my brothers they're going to be as useless as their respective fathers. She told me I must be selling." Leah paused, her jaw tightening. "In her words, tail, to afford my apartment. Then she slut-shamed me for this dress, saying I'm advertising that I'm easy." She let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, and Kofo must not exist, because if he did, he would have come to the airport with me." The words settled heavily between them. "Woo, that is a lot," Geneva said, leaning back slightly. "So, are you going to introduce him to your mother?" Leah shook her head immediately. "No, I plan to marry that man someday, and if he gets a full face-forward experience of the bitterness that is Deborah Harris, he'll run back to Ghana on foot just to get away from me." She said it half-jokingly, but there was no mistaking the truth behind it. A brief silence passed. "And then there's Sherry," Leah added, her tone shifting, letting the name sit long enough for Geneva to feel it. "Oh, Sherry," Geneva said quietly. "Yeah, she has the potential to be a problem." "What did Kofo say about the Cherie situation?" she asked. "Nothing, just that she's no one to worry about and that he's got it under control." Leah exhaled softly, but her expression didn't soften. "But I think he underestimates what bitterness and desperation can do to a woman." She leaned back, her voice lowering, growing sharper. "I've had a front row seat, and the misfortune of being an unwilling target, my entire life when it comes to women like that, so I know it when I see it." Leah's gaze hardened. And make no mistake, under those designer clothes, makeup, and that cool, composed exterior, is someone desperate and bitter. She paused, letting the words land fully. "And that makes her a problem." A pause. A very dangerous problem. Geneva, sensing that Leah was speaking more to herself than her, sat silently, absorbing the weight of the situation. Leah sensed it before it was spoken. Something changed. The room was no longer dismissive, it was cautious, measured. She stood at the head of the table, her presentation loaded, posture steady. The lead executive smiled politely. "We're interested to see how you've refined things," he said. Leah nodded, masking her unease. She knew something shifted before she arrived. 2 nights earlier, Cherie sat in a midtown lounge with a glass of wine, surrounded by the very executives Leah now faced. She spoke softly. "I've heard a lot about Leah. She's ambitious, driven. But sometimes ambition makes people rush, especially when they're trying to prove themselves." Cherie let concern linger in the air. Others slowly took on the same concern. Mission accomplished. Doubt has replaced interest. Steady, focused, controlled. But every question was a test. Are you confident in your projections? How do you handle pressure? Who reviewed this? She answered but knew. She was undermined. Made to be doubted. She held it together until she got home. Barely. The door closed behind her, and the silence didn't hold. It cracked. Leah pressed her back against the wall, sliding down slowly, her chest tightening in a way that had nothing to do with the meeting itself. They already made up their minds. she whispered, voice breaking. I didn't even get a fair chance. Her hands covered her face as quiet tears slipped through. Months of work. Precision. Growth. Reduced to doubt she hadn't earned. I did everything right, she said softly. Everything. She didn't know someone was listening. In the hallway, Deborah Harris stood still. She had come to say something sharp, critical, habitual. But instead, she heard her daughter breaking. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't see weakness. She saw weight. Deborah stepped into the room slowly. Leah didn't even notice at first. Then, a voice, quieter than she had ever heard it. You didn't do everything right, Deborah said. Leah stiffened. Here it comes. But Deborah continued. You did better than anything I ever had the chance to do. Leah lowered her hands slowly, eyes red, confused. Deborah crossed her arms, but this time, it wasn't defensive, it was steady. You walked into rooms I was never allowed near, she continued. Built something I didn't have the tools to even imagine. A pause. Then, softer. And you think one room gets to decide what that means? Leah stared at her. Silent. Deborah exhaled, looking away for a moment. I've said a lot of things to you, she admitted. Some of them wrong. That word didn't come easy. But it came. You're not failing, she said firmly. You're being tested. Leah's voice trembled. It doesn't feel like a test. Deborah stepped closer. It's because when you are in the middle of a storm, you are not focusing on naming it, you are focusing on coming through it, she said. And that's not weakness, that is survival. A pause. Then, I'm proud of you. The words landed heavier than anything else that night. Leah blinked, stunned, because she had never heard them before. Another pause, this time followed by a hug, loose, timid at first, then tight, not crushing but comforting. Needed. I love you, Leah, Deborah continued this time without hesitation. I know nothing about our relationship points to that, but I do. You and your brothers are my greatest accomplishments. With that, Leah felt years of harsh words, raised fits and outright hatred starting to lose some of their sting. The next morning, Kofo didn't wait. He had listened carefully, watched closely, and something hadn't sat right. Not the questions, not the tone, not the sudden shift in perception. It didn't match Leah's work, which meant it came from somewhere else. And then it clicked. Cherie. Not through proximity, through influence. Kofo moved through his own networks quickly. Quiet calls, subtle confirmations, names mentioned in the right rooms. And the pattern revealed itself. Dinner. Private. Curated. Influenced. He found Cherie that afternoon. Not in an office. Not in a shared space. In a setting she controlled. A rooftop lounge. Polished. Exclusive. Predictable. Cherie turned as he approached, her expression warm. Kofo, she said smoothly. I didn't expect. You knew exactly what you were doing, he said. No greeting. No soft entry. Just truth. Cherie's smile didn't drop, but it changed. Measured now. You'll have to be more specific, she replied. Kofo stepped closer, his voice calm but unwavering. You didn't touch her work, he said. You touched the people judging it. Silence. Cherie held his gaze. No denial, just interest. She's talented, Cherie said lightly. But this level requires more than talent. Kofo didn't blink. What it requires, he said, is fairness. Something you disrupted. A pause. Then, I don't care what you think of me, he continued, but you will not define her before she gets the chance to stand on her own work. Cherie studied him. Really studied him. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? Kofo's expression didn't shift. That same day, conversations happened. Not loud, not dramatic. Precise. Clarifying. Reframing. The same room Cherie had influenced, now hearing something different. Not force. Balance. And by the time Leah received the follow-up, the tone had shifted. Leah stared at her phone when it rang. Unknown number. Her heart pounded as she answered. This is Leah. Leah, this is Terence from the Rogers Group. Her breath caught. We've reviewed your revised presentation, he continued, and we'd like to move forward. with you leading the campaign. Silence, just for a second. Then, professional again. Thank you, she said. But when the call ended, the realization hit. She did it. Weeks later, Leah stood in a different room. Same confidence. Different energy. This time, they listened. Fully. No hesitation. No doubt hanging in the air. Just recognition. Geneva stood in the back, arms crossed, approving. Kofo watched quietly. Pride evident but unspoken. And Leah didn't shrink, didn't over-explain, didn't try to prove she belonged. She knew she did, because she hadn't just survived pressure. She had risen through it. Kofo knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Leah, but before he asked her to be his wife, he needed to share all of him with her, which meant blessings. He has to tell Leah about blessings. Kofo sat beside Leah in her cozy apartment, the quiet hum of the city outside a faint backdrop to the heaviness settling between them. He had been silent for a while, staring at the glass of water in his hands, before finally glancing at her with a mixture of hesitation and resolve. Leah, he began softly, voice steady but laced with emotion. There's something I need to tell you. Something I've never said out loud, but it's time. Leah looked at him, concern flickering in her eyes. You can tell me anything, Kofo? He nodded, taking a deep breath. Before I came to Atlanta, before I ever thought I'd meet someone like you, I lost someone very important to me. My fiancée. Her name was Blessings. We were supposed to start a life together. Plans, dreams, everything. Leah reached for his hand, squeezing gently. He continued, voice thickening. It was a tragic plane crash. A moment that changed everything. I was the one who asked her to come with me, to start anew here in the States. She was afraid of flying, worried about leaving her family, her home. She wanted to wait until I returned back to Ghana and fly back to the States with me. But I pushed her to come sooner. I told her we didn't have forever, that we had to seize the moment. Leah's grip tightened. But she was silent, wanting to give him the time and space to share his truth. He looked away, eyes clouded with pain. It was. And I blame myself every day. I keep thinking, if I hadn't pushed her, if I'd just let her wait, she'd still be here. I carry that guilt like a stone around my neck. It's why I became the man I was, running from serious relationships, love anything real. I thought if I kept everything light, kept it moving, I could avoid that pain. But I realize now, he paused, searching her face. I want to share all of me with you, Leah, the good, the bad, the hurt, because I trust you. And I want you to see the real Kofo. Leah's eyes shimmered with tears, her heart aching for him. You don't have to carry that alone. I want to hold that pain with you. I want to share everything, your whole heart, Kofo. Because I see you, more than your charm, more than your mischievous grin. I see the man who's been through so much and still chooses to love, to hope. He looked at her, vulnerability shining through. It's hard to believe I can let someone in again after everything, but with you, I feel like maybe I don't have to carry it all alone anymore. Leah leaned into him, her voice trembling but steady. You don't. Because I want to share your journey, Kofo, your joys, your hurts. I want all of you. Every piece, every scar, if you'll let me. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. Then I'm giving you all of me. The joys, the pain, the love I've been afraid to admit I still carry. And I pray you'll stay to see it all. And in that quiet moment, with their hearts laid bare, Leah knew that love, true love, meant sharing even the deepest wounds, and trusting that together, they could heal. They spent the night holding each other, reminding one another they were not alone. The restaurant was quiet, in the way that only places of intention are. Soft lighting. Polished glass. A view of the Atlanta skyline that shimmered like something earned rather than given. Leah paused just inside the entrance, taking it in. Kofo, this is deserved, he said simply. His hand rested lightly at her back as he guided her inside. Not pushing. Anchoring. They had reserved a table tucked near the window, the city stretching wide beneath them like a map of everything she had fought through. Leah smiled as she sat, exhaling slowly. I still can't believe it, she admitted. The contract, that room, how everything shifted. Kofo didn't answer right away, he just watched her. Not the moment, her. I can, he said quietly. Leah looked up. You walked into that situation already prepared, he continued. Everything after that just gave people time to catch up to what I already knew. Something in his tone stilled her. Not casual, not light, intentional. Dinner came and went in pieces. Laughter, quiet reflection. The kind of conversation that only happens when two people understand what it took to get to that moment. And then, it shifted. Kofo set his glass down slowly. Leah noticed. "Why do I feel like something is happening?" she said, smiling faintly. Kofo stood. Then moved around the table. And before she could fully process it, he knelt. Leah's breath caught. The entire restaurant seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them suspended in something that felt bigger than the moment itself. "Leah Harris," he began, his voice steady, but deeper than she'd ever heard it. "You are the strongest, most intentional and most relentless woman I have ever known." Leah's eyes filled instantly. "You walk into rooms and change what they expect," he continued. "Not because you demand it, but because you refuse to be anything less than who you are." A small box opened in his hand. Inside, a ring unlike anything she had ever seen. A deep chocolate diamond, rich and warm, set in a band of soft gold that caught the light with understated brilliance. Not traditional, not expected. Perfectly her. "I didn't want something ordinary," Kofo said softly. "I wanted something that carried strength, depth, something that reflected how you stand in the world." He held her gaze. "And I want to stand with you, in every room, in every season." A pause. Then, "Will you marry me?" Leah laughed through tears, one hand covering her mouth before she shook her head in disbelief. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." Kofo slid the ring onto her finger, his hands steady even as hers trembled. The restaurant erupted softly in applause. But Leah barely heard it. Because in that moment, it wasn't about the room, it was about what she had built, and who she chose to share it with. Staring at her hand, she admired how it looked with its new adornment. She looked at Kofo and asked, "How did you know Jill Lawrence is my favorite artist?" He smiled. "Before Fusion moved to the 19th floor, I stopped by yours and Geneva's." He paused. "To see you, and something else. You were in a very intense conversation with. I figured out it was your mother. When the call ended, you looked as if you were on the verge of losing it. Then, you told Siri to play my girl, the good stuff, and it was Jill. By the time the third song came on, you were up dancing. You actually did the high-stepping when she sang those words, like it was a command. So I made a mental note to give you an up-close and personal experience with your girl," he said with a grin. Her smile shifted from admiration to mischievousness. "So you were making up ridiculous excuses to see me back then?" He moaned playfully and pulled her closer. "I'll take the fifth," he said, his laughter full and unguarded. The wedding in Atlanta was everything Leah never allowed herself to imagine, but now fully embraced. A palette of layered blues. Soft powder blue flowing through the bridesmaids' dresses, deep navy accents grounding the space in elegance. Hints of sapphire woven into table settings, glassware and floral arrangements. Silver details catching light like quiet celebration. The ceremony took place beneath an open arch draped in cascading blue orchids and white roses, the contrast soft and powerful at once. Leah's dress moved like water, structured but effortless, flowing with each step she took down the aisle. Kofo stood waiting, grounded, proud, his gaze never leaving her. Guests whispered softly, not out of judgment but admiration, because it wasn't just beautiful, it was intentional. Every detail, every color, every moment felt like a reflection of who she had become. Calm, in confidence. Strong in presence. Unapologetically seen. And when they said their vows, it wasn't just about love, it was about partnership, choice, alignment. But the celebration didn't end there. In Ghana, everything felt different. Richer, louder, alive. Color replaced subtlety. Tradition replaced restraint. Leah stood dressed in stunning kente cloth, woven with gold, royal blue and deep earth tones, each pattern telling a story older than anything she had ever known before. The air was filled with music, drums that didn't just play, but spoke. Family surrounded them, not in quiet rows, but in movement, joy, presence. Ceremonies unfolded in layers. The knocking ceremony, where Kofo's family formally asked for her hand. The exchange of gifts, symbolic and honored elders offering blessings, their words carrying weight and history. Laughter, dancing, ululations rising into the open sky. Leah felt it. Not just a wedding, but a joining. Of worlds, of histories, of identity expanding beyond anything she once thought it could be. Kofo stood beside her in traditional attire, powerful and rooted. guiding her through it, not as someone unfamiliar, but as someone welcomed. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was stepping into something unknown. She felt like she belonged there too. Somewhere else. Far removed from the music, the celebration, the union. Cherie scrolled through images she hadn't been meant to care about. Leah, smiling, winning, thriving, the ring, the headlines, the rising recognition in professional circles. Cherie set her phone down slowly, her expression still, controlled. But her jaw tightened ever so slightly. Because this wasn't what she had anticipated. Not the outcome. Not the trajectory. She hadn't lost in a single moment. She had lost over time. Missed shifts. Misread resilience. Underestimated something she didn't fully understand. Cherie exhaled slowly, and for the first time, there was no move to make, no angle to play, no narrative to control, just truth. Leah had risen anyway. Leah stood between two worlds, one she had built and one she had grown into, and realized they were no longer separate, because she wasn't becoming something new anymore. She had already become it. The celebrations had quieted. The music, the laughter, the movement of people and moments that had filled days and nights, all of it had softened into memory. Now, there was just stillness. Leah stood on the balcony, the air warm against her skin, the night stretching wide and open above her. In the distance, faint sounds of celebration still drifted, but here, it felt separate, peaceful. She looked down at her hand. The chocolate diamond caught the soft light, deep and rich, steady, grounded, unpretentious, like everything she had built, like everything she had become. She hadn't heard him step out behind her, but she felt him. Kofo didn't speak right away. He simply moved beside her, resting his forearms against the railing, his presence settling naturally into the space she occupied. For a moment, they just stood there. Together. No performance, no expectation, just them. "You're quiet," he said finally. Leah exhaled softly, a small smile touching her lips. "I think I'm finally catching up to everything." Kofo glanced at her. "And?" She turned to him, not rushed, not overwhelmed. "Certain. I didn't think I would have all of this," she said. "Not like this, not without losing something along the way." Kofo's expression softened. "What do you think you would have had to lose?" he asked. Leah searched for the answer, but it didn't come the way it used to. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe myself." Kofo shook his head gently. "That was never an option," he said. Leah studied him, her gaze steady. "There were moments when it felt like it might be," she replied quietly. Kofo reached for her hand then, slow, deliberate, his fingers lacing through hers. "But you didn't," he said. "Not praise, not exaggeration, just fact." Leah's grip tightened slightly around his. "No," she said, "I didn't." A small smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. "And now I understand why." Kofo raised an eyebrow slightly. "Why?" Leah stepped closer, closing the space between them. "Because I wasn't meant to do it alone," she said. The words hung there, simple, but deeply rooted. Kofo's hand lifted, brushing lightly along her jaw before resting at the side of her face. "You were never alone," he said softly, "even when it felt like it." Leah leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for just a moment. When she opened them again, there was no uncertainty left. "I don't want to just build a life that looks successful," she said. "I want to build one that feels right, honest, shared." Kofo smiled, faint but real. "Then we will," he said. No hesitation, no conditions, just certainty meeting certainty. Leah let out a quiet breath, something deeper than relief settling into her. "I love you," she said. The words were steady now, uncomplicated, strong. Kofo's gaze didn't waver. "I love you too," he replied. Not grand, not performative, just true. He pulled her gently into him, and Leah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm beneath her ear. Below them, the city stretched wide. Behind them, two worlds had come together. Ahead of them, everything they would build next. Leah didn't feel like she was chasing anything anymore. Didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Standing there, wrapped in quiet, grounded certainty, she finally understood. Success wasn't just what she had achieved. It was what she had protected. What she had chosen. Who she had become. And who she chose to walk beside her. And as the night settled gently around them, Leah Harrisantwi realized she hadn't just found her place in the world, she had created it. And that brings us to the end of Leah and Kofo's journey today. We first met Leah and Kofo in our story, Threads and Fortune. If you haven't had the pleasure of exploring their beginnings, I encourage you to check out the story. I promise you won't be disappointed. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me, my cultured pearls. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates the beauty of our blended traditions. Our quest to grow our channel can only be achieved with your incredible support. Every like, share and subscribe truly means the world to us and allows us to continue bringing you these incredible stories of love. Before you go, I want to hear from you. What part of today's narrative resonated with you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know what part of the world you are joining us from. Until next time, keep celebrating the